Here's a fun one for you in TinkerCAD, and one that has a million different uses, making simple nameplates that can be 3D printed. Alright, to start, I've logged into TinkerCAD. I'm going to change my file name right away. And I'm going to change it to nameplates. And then I'm going to come down here, and I like working in inches instead of millimeters, so where it says edit grid in the lower right corner, I'm going to click, change my units to inches, and then also under the presets, I'll open up that pull down menu, and I will select the second one on the list, the Dremel 3D45. That's going to make my work plane the exact size of the build space in the Dremel 3D printer. And that's one of the coolest things to do with these nameplates. So I'm going to do 3 different styles, starting with something kind of simple, getting a little bit fancier as we go along. To start super simple, I'm just going to grab a box and bring it in. Alright, and then I have my handy dandy tape measure here, because you got to type in numbers so that you know exactly how big this stuff's going to be when you go print it. And I think I'm going to have this one be a 4-inch long by 1-inch wide nameplate. So I'll type in 4, and then I'll just leave that one at 1. And then I don't want to print it, it's quite so thick, so I'm going to shrink it up a little bit. I'm going to grab that top gray handlebar, and I'm going to bring it down from 1 inch. I'm going to go all the way down to 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, man, when you're holding on to a printed 1/4 inch thing, it's substantial. All right, so I have a very simple box there. Now I need to type something. There's a few different ways we can get to the text tools. Over here under the basic shapes menu, if you scroll down a little bit, there is a text button right there. Also in the pull down menu, there's a whole nother chunk for text and numbers. I'm just going to work in the basic shapes one though, and click on the text and bring it over. Menu on the right, you can decide what you want it to say. How about I make some things for my wonderful dog, whose name is Danzig, after the German city or the 1980s heavy metal band you choose. All right, so Danzig, there are a couple different font choices that you can have. It's not extensive at all, but gives you a couple of them to play around with. I'm just going to leave it on this multi-language one. And now I have it on the screen. I need to shrink it up so that it's going to fit on top of that nameplate. So I'll just grab it and start shrinking it up. If I hold down Shift, the proportions stay consistent, so it's not getting skinny or getting stretched out or anything. Just to make this next move a little easier, I will change the color. So I'll go from having 2 red things to having 1 red and 1, green. All right. And then I'm just going to line these things up by clicking on one, clicking on the other while I hold down Shift, so they're both selected. And then I can use the Align tool to align them on the X and the Y axis. Only problem is right now, I think it is high enough so that it's just barely poking out. I was thinking it was at the same level, but you see how the green text is actually poking out just a little bit. That's good. I'm going to actually make it poke out a little bit more by clicking on it, and then not grabbing the black one. Actually, I can grab the black one, and it's going to pull it up. So it's not actually changing the height of this thing, it's just bringing it up and out just a little bit more. And that was pretty good. In fact, that was significant, maybe even more than what I would like. The problem is that every time I move it, it has to move in an 1/8 inch increment. It's because I have these snaps on, the grid snaps. If I want to turn those off, down here in the lower right corner, it says snap grid, and every 1/8 of an inch, it's going to snap to that point. If I want to have more control, I can make a smaller number, or I could just turn it off completely. And now when I grab it, it's really sensitive, and I can make it poke out just as much as I would want. All right, let's see what it looks like. Pretty darn cool. My dog would absolutely love it. But what is my dog going to do with this thing? Not much. He doesn't have a desk he could sit it on or someplace cool he could put it. You know what he does have, though? He does have a collar. So how about we do another one, and I'll introduce a really cool new tool for us. But this one I'm going to design it with the idea that it could be a collar for my dog, or it could be, a collar for a cat, or a collar for a person, or whoever you need to give a collar to. All right, so I am going to grab a new shape for us instead of using the basic shape. So I'm going to open up this pull down menu, and down a little ways there's a section called shape generators. I'm going to click on featured. These are not your basic shapes. These are a bunch of funky shapes, but what's extra cool about these, they're like little built-in apps that allow you to change a couple of numbers and it will change your shape in some really cool ways. To get started, I'm going to try this first one here, the extrusion. So I'm going to click on it and bring it in. Now it looks like just a simple cylinder. However, there's a new little menu that we haven't seen before that pops up. This is a top view of my object, and I can grab these squares and start pulling them out, and notice that my object on the screen is changing. So I can get these really kind of funky, cool, organic shapes just by being a little patient and doing some serious modeling. Let me see if I can get that back to there. But what I'm doing here right now is I'm just going to try to kind of elongate this thing, make it kind of egg-shaped almost, so that it would be a cool collar for my dog. So I'm going to pull out one of these little squares, and I'm going to pull out the other one too. But then I want it to be kind of egg-shaped, so I'm going to pull back these top ones and try to line them up. And there we go. That's starting to look a little bit like a tag that you might see on an animal. And then over here on the main work plane, I can make it a little bit thinner by clicking on the height slider. And I want to make this one, I think I'm going to go for 1/4 of an inch, so 0.25. And yep, and I want to make this one just a little bit thick because I'm going to use text in a different way than in our first nameplate, where I'm going to recess the text into the shape and hollow it out, use it as a hole, and you get really cool products when it comes off the printer. All right, so I think I have my basic shape set up. I guess want to check the height and the width on this one, so I'm going to click on one of the gray handlebars, and this is a little over 3/4 of an inch wide and not quite 1.5 inches. How about just so I'm working with nice round numbers, I'm going to do that 0.5 or 1.5 and then 0.75. And that actually does seem like a pretty good size if I grab my tape measure and start pulling it out. Yeah, that'd be a nice name tag for my big dog. Okay, so I got all the shapes set up there. It's looking great. Now I'm just going to grab some text. So back under the pull-down menu, I will go to Basic Shapes and Text. And bring in some text. Once again, put my dog's name in there. And I'll shrink it up a little bit here, holding down Shift once again so that the proportions stay. Alright, now I'm going to make this thing relatively tall. So I'm going to grab on the height slider. And just stretch it up so that it's quite a bit taller than my name tag, little teardrop thing that I made a second ago. I'll select both of them and line them up, align them. So they're both selected. Hit the Align tool. I'm going to align on the X and on the Y. All right. So it is looking pretty good. And right now, this thing would cut all the way through it. I don't want to cut all the way through it, because then I'd have a bunch of little pieces kind of floating around. So I'm going to select only the text and not stretching the text so that the object itself is stretching, but selecting the text on the Z-axis. So I'm just kind of lifting this text up a little bit. I can bring it all the way up until it completely clears the nameplate, but I don't want to go quite that far. So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. I'm going to change the shape to a hole, and then select them both, and group them. There it is. All right, that's going to be super cool. The 3D printer can actually handle those insets perhaps a little bit better even than the ones that are raised. So that's going to be great. Hey, one thing it's missing though, if it's supposed to go on my dog, I do want to put a little hole up there. So I could just grab a cylinder. And then I can shrink that up relatively small, holding down Shift once again. Gonna need to make it nice and tall. It's a little too big still, so I'll shrink it up a little more. All right, I'm going to look at this from a top view. If I want, I could even get that thing lined up perfectly by selecting both of those objects and using the align command. All right, so now I have a little name tag, or a little hole. If I select that solid object, turn it into a hole, select both of those objects, and group them. There it goes. Took a second to click in there. Now you can see I have a hole all the way through, and that's where I could put the little ring to put on his collar. All right, so far 2 relatively simple nameplates here. There is just one more I wanted to show you, but really I want to give you permission to just cut loose and have fun with this technique and see what you can come up with. Can create some pretty cool stuff. So I'm going to drag this one out of the way. And first one, very, very basic. Second one had an actual purpose. It could go on an animal like a name tag collar. Hey, another one that's kind of fun is doing the desktop nameplate. Great standard primitive shape here to start with is a roof. All right. And you've probably seen these before, right? You walk into someone's office and on the desk they have their name. That's what we're going to be doing. A really cool present for somebody in your life. Right now this is the base is a little wide here. I'm going to stretch it in. Sorry, shrink it in. I'm going to orbit around a little bit. And now that's looking a little more like a nameplate. It's kind of short though, so it's a little over an inch long. I'm going to click on that one, and using my tape measure, I think a 5-inch long nameplate would be perfect desk size. So I'll type in 5. And now I have my base for my nameplate. I just need to get some text. I'm going to grab the text tool and drop in some text. I can rotate this so it lines up a little bit better with my shape. I can rotate it 90 degrees. And then again, I'll stick with my dog's name, Danzig. And I am going to have to make this a little bit smaller so it fits on there. So I'll grab one of the side little gray handlebars, shrink it up, holding down the Shift key to keep it from getting all distorted. And I think I will end up making this bar a little bit shorter than 5 inches. Now that I'm working with the text, it's a little long. Right. So that looks roughly the right size. Now the final trick with this one is just getting the angle right so that it lines up on that roof standard primitive object nicely. To do that, I need to make sure that I grab the right angle tool. There's a couple different angles that I can flip this thing on, and I want to make sure that I get the one that's going to allow me to kind of twist it sideways. And I'm thinking about a 67 degree angle's looking good right now. Let me smash it into there and see what happens. It's looking good. It's a little low, so using the arrow keys I can bump it up a little bit. So it's taken a little bit of time. That is because I had these snaps off. Let me turn it back on, but at a lower number. It was at 1/8 inch before. Let me just put it at a 32nd. Oops. And this can be a little weird because we're working with a few different angles here. Alright, but that looks pretty darn good. Alright, let me trim up that that bar just a little bit. So I had it at 5 inches. I will bring it down to 2 inches. And there we go. 3 different cool ways to make name tags. Again, take a picture of your work and put it on your blog.